Good to see you holding on to my copy right here. Right. So I'm
I've
very,
got,
very, you've
I
got,
just got finished copies in yesterday. I really pushed for this orange one, and they went with it in the US and in Canada. They went their own way, and I love the cover they've come up with for that too. It's just interesting. Different markets, you would think one cover would either be like good or bad, but I guess there's a cultural element to it too, like a different class of books almost in these different territories. You learn so much. Book number 4, you know?
yeah. Well, I was going to say that I wonder if, because I mean, and you and I've been in the space long enough to know that maybe the UK and US look at productivity and time management, they do differently than Canadians do. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
their values, which we're going to get into.
Oh,
The
yeah.
cultural values, I think, are different, and we're not even talking.
Yeah.
We're not going down a political rabbit hole here. Just in general, I think
Yeah, let's avoid all that.
please let's avoid that. But I mean, like, I think there's some sensibilities that are different, right? And I think that makes
Mhm.
it a little bit more of a because whenever I've worked with Canadian clients, it's more about like GDP and productivity in terms of not in terms of personal development or anything. Like they don't think about it quite in the same way, or they don't approach it quite in the same way. That's what I've
Yeah.
experienced. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
experienced the same thing, but I have.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, the different books. Like, I'll speak candidly here.
Sure.
So, my biggest book in Canada is called How to Calm Your Mind. And next, like, number 2 selling for me up here, it's, like, not even close. How to Calm Your Mind has cleaned up in Canada relative to the other books, whereas in the US market, it fell, like, flat on its face when it encountered
Wow.
the booksellers market. It sold, I think, maybe, like, 10 or 20,000 copies in the US, which is far, like, it's a good, I'm happy with that number. I'm happy with the people who it's connected with and helped. But it's far, far lower than a book like Hyperfocus in the US. Whereas Hyperfocus, when it was introduced in Canada, that totally flopped.
Yeah.
Whereas internationally and in the US, I think we just crossed 400,000 copies sold of that book. And so you think, like, How to Calm Your Mind, doing gangbusters in Canada, but not in the US, kind of mid, I think, in the UK relative to the other books. All I have are my other books for the
Sure. Of
relativity of it
course.
all. But Hyperfocus, I found, was a very interesting phenomenon because I think, it's the attention component, the intention component.
Mhm.
Hyperfocus was about attention. Intentional, as you
Yep.
can imagine, is about the intentional component of it all. Yeah, I think intentional will find that warmer reception, maybe given the different cover up here. But I really find it interesting when idea meets culture. There's a cultural response to the idea.
Yeah.
And sometimes it embraces the idea. Other times it's like, no, no,
Yep.
thank you. We don't need hyperfocus up here in Canada when it's
So
really essentially a book about mindfulness.
sure. So the thought process I immediately go to is Canadians are fine with being told what to do and how to do it, how to calm your mind. Other audiences are like, you can't tell me how to do this. But if you've got a sparky enough word on the, it's gonna be like, what's
Yeah.
that? What's this? And it will be interesting because now that and How to Calm Your Mind was great. I think what I really appreciate about all of your work is, again, it's that body of work that's been assembled, right? You have since day one been curious about this phenomena from the start, and instead of so to draw a comparison that I can do based on reading both of your kind of journeys, Cal Newport,
Yeah.
yourself, right? Both curious about these different phenomena, but approaching it, it's like you can see each other from your respective paths and can wave to each other, but
Yeah.
there is enough delineation there that I think is fascinating because you're going deep into very specific kind of facets of it, right? Like, again, hyperfocus, the facet of attention, how to calm your mind, the facet of mindfulness, intentional, the facet, the facet of intentionality. Cal's done similar things in maybe broader strokes, right? Like not deep work is broader, digital minimalism broader. He's tackled obviously slow productivity. That's very broad, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to let me look at this. Let me look. It's not unlike well, Tiago Forte is writing a book about the annual review, right? Like he's diving
Mhm,
into the
mhm.
reflective piece, which comes up
Yeah.
again in this book. So let's dive in. First off, what's a hierarchy? I've never.
I'm trying to make hierarchy a thing in the book. Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned like Cal and I finally share a cover here. Cal,
Yep,
the Cal's
yep,
in tiny
yeah.
print
You
at the
got the
top,
blurb at the top. Yep.
and big print. I think Tiago's on the back. Yeah, Tiago's on the on the back
There you
there
go.
too. Um, so full circle there. It is interesting, when you look at a topic like intentionality, human intentionality. You're exactly right. I've been sort of circling around this idea of intentionality for, by gosh, a decade. Every book that I've written, all three of them plus the Audible original, they incorporate this idea of becoming more intentional. But I've never found enough meat on the bones with the idea of intentionality to be able to dive into it completely, because I didn't want to write a book about intention that's like a few ideas and the rest is fluff. I want like a lot of meat that people can sink their teeth into, both on the science and on the tactical end. And it took about a decade to get there, which surprised me. But it's interesting. You say hierarchy, and one of the big unlocks for me in the process of writing this book was seeing the science of values. And so values, human values, it's this topic that I've always kind of, my eyes have glazed over when I've heard people talk about it, because all I can think of are those like corporate exercises where some consultant comes in and they have a list of 100, and it's like, these are your values, circle the ones you love. And there's there's no science behind that though. But like the fascinating thing to me is when you look at the science behind human values, there's a literal gold mine about what we value on a fundamental human level. And what the research shows is that what we value, those are our ultimate intentions in our life, that they are what we are after. So, some of us, you mentioned Canadian cultural values. Self direction is one of the 12 values that we all share in different amounts. It's incredibly high in Canada. Maybe it's no wonder they went their own way with the cover of
Yeah.
intention. And so, but we all have different amounts of all 12 of these values, but they're not only our ultimate intentions in life, they are the motivational core that we all have, that either motivates us to do something or repels us away, and then we don't want to do something. So you need to accommodate values in the pursuit of intention, but you don't need the list of 100. You just need to figure out which of the 12 are the strongest for you, and then let the intentions in your life, insofar as you have the latitude to make this happen, flow from those and connect with those across all the different layers of intention we have in our life.
Why do you think we always focus on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs as opposed to this values research? Because I've never seen it
Mm.
before either. Like I've never really,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And one of the first things I wrote down
Yeah.
in the chapter that's called values, which again permeates its way through the book, is
Yeah.
source of friction. And what I mean by that
Yeah.
is it's the source of friction. And you talk about this, the idea of like, if you don't have this, if something
Mhm.
is butting heads against your values, like an intent, like it's going to be either harder for you to do, or when you get to a
Mhm.
virgin, might be the thing you do just to avoid, right? Like you might go down that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs, which by the way has been torn apart, built up. We're going to get into some of the pithiness that can come along with some of these frameworks and structures. SMART goals is going to
Yeah.
be one of them, but
Yeah.
because you go into that. But why do you think that we haven't really heard about this to the same degree, or even in blog posts or social
Mhm.
media? Like I've never
Yeah.
stumbled across this in the same way. Which, by the way,
Yeah.
not surprisingly, it's layered, and you go into it in a very
Mhm.
layered way throughout the book. So I'd love to hear your thoughts
Yeah.
on that.
You know what I honestly think it is? I think anyone who wants to talk about values doesn't wanna go into Google Scholar and type in values. When you do, it's
Yeah.
amazing what comes up. This theory of, and full credit where credit is due to, Professor Shalom Schwartz. He pioneered this theory of fundamental human values that's been validated scientifically in more than 60 countries cross-culturally, across hundreds of thousands of participants. It's the most active field of research in this field of values, and there basically is no second place. This is the science of values. And so, we talk about needs, and this is very much, focus on your values once your basic needs are met,
Sure.
once you have the safety. Um it's kind of needs versus volition.
Mm,
So once you have the space to be able to go your own way in your work, in your life, we don't always have 100% space for volition. We're not monks living in a cave. Though I actually chatted with a lot of monks in piecing together this book who introduced a lot of surprising lessons about the nature of intentionality, which complemented the science almost perfectly, which I found interesting. But I think when we are able to create the space in our work and our life to act more deliberately, that is where values need to come into play.
mm.
Because even if your ultimate goal is more accomplishment, achievement is one of the fundamental human values. Or whether your goal is to help other people, benevolence is one of the fundamental human values. Or whether your goal is just more pleasure and to be lazy with your time after work, pleasure is one of the 12 fundamental human values. That's what productivity is for. I ultimately think that, and I write about this in the book too, that we should be viewing success as the extent to which we're able to manifest our values in our everyday life,
Right.
bring them to life in what we do. Because then we feel like what we're doing is completely connected with who we are. And I'm happy you touched on the different layers of intentionality. So there's the values component, but the interesting thing about intention itself, and it was so fun to nerd out about the science and the research on this stuff. There are all kinds of different timelines across which we can become intentional, and we all know this on some level, right? Like we want to, over the course of our life, make a contribution to the world. But that manifests it on different levels across the span of our life. Like over these 18 years, we might want to raise a great family and build great humans and help them build themselves into being good people. And then over the next year, we might have goals with work, and over the next month, we have the deadlines that we want to hit. And over the next week and day, and like now, you have an intention to listen to the podcast or watch it. Hello, anybody watching. So this is what I find so interesting is there are so many levels across which we can become intentional. And so this was another big, unlock feels like such a corny word, but it was an unlock for me in
Sure.
piecing together these ideas because you can make a model of sorts with all that houses all these layers of intention that we have in our life. And in the book, I call it the intention stack. So
Yeah.
the broadest intentions we have in our life, those are our values. That's ultimately what we're trying not to knock over my water bottle as I gesticulate here. The values are our broadest intentions we have. They take place over our entire life. But on a shorter time span than that, we have our priorities in life, which are related to our values and our goals. Then beneath that, in length of time, we have the goals that we are making happen, the stories of change that we're creating. Then shorter than that, we have the plans that we have. And then shorter than that, at the very bottom, we have the present intentions that we have, things we want to get done today, this week, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And so accommodating all these layers of intention in our life, that's how we achieve our goals. We don't just focus on the little band in the middle of this intention stack and think, okay, this is the goal that I hope to achieve. We have to follow it through down to the daily level, but it also has to connect with the broader goals in our life, the broader motivations we have in our life, which are the values that we have. And so it's really a book about goal attainment because if we attain all the goals we set, then we're perfectly intentional.
Yeah, it's interesting when I look at the
Mhm.
intention stack, the goals sit right squarely as the middle
Yeah,
category, right?
yeah.
Because
The
it goes
goals yeah, goals are a bridge between what we do and who we are.
right, right.
Yeah.
I want to share some stuff that we're hearing in the chat. First off, I love Tim. Tim said, "Who wants to listen to the scientists when you can just make stuff up yourself?" And we're
Yeah,
going to talk
the
about
story of consulting, yeah.
and then
Uh,
we've got Chase, who does a lot of research around a variety of things. He's really so he
great.
says, "I appreciate your helpful strategy to categorize triggers and plan responses to alter habits and break the impasse." You get
Mhm.
into habit
Yeah,
stuff in here pretty significantly as well.
yeah, yeah.
And the big challenge for Chase, he says, is the effort it takes to jump back into the context of work. So, like typically debugging a data science pipeline. So
Mhm.
let's I want to talk
Yeah.
about the first off the idea of SMART goals. You talked about like the idea of so when I can't tell you, you mentioned the values exercise, like circle the values that matter most to you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then you and I've heard about the avatar exercise. I can't tell you how many times you probably, like, who's your ideal audience? And it's like,
Mhm.
you go through these exercises to the point where they're like, you can do it rote, right? SMART goals.
Yeah.
I was recently in a program around CBT, like, so cognitive
Okay.
behavioral therapy, and they
Yeah.
were bringing up SMART goals.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, and my
Oh, no.
my eyes rolled like visibly on the screen
Yeah.
I was on with to the point where they're like, and I'm like, because we've gone through them so many times, and it's
Yeah.
almost as if so what I loved is, and I did not know this again. See, I just leave it up to Chris to do all this research.
That's okay. I don't mind. I
so
don't mind.
so can you talk about, and you touch on this in the book, um,
Mhm.
are SMART goals actually smart?
This was the most surprising thing that I uncovered over the course of researching goals. Because, and by the way, I've written about SMART goals in the past for my
Mhm.
website.
Yep.
And so when I encountered the research, I was kicking myself because I thought, how could I not just search for the research on SMART goals before writing about them? Because they sound so obviously great, right? You know, the word smart is in the name. Who doesn't want to set a smart goal? Um, but you look at the actual research on them, the origin story of SMART goals. So it's actually very similar to the 10,000 step rule, which was, I think it was like a fitness gadget of some sort that, marketed the idea of 10,000. It's a nice round number each and every day,
Oh yeah,
but
well,
there isn't really a research.
Yeah, Gladwell brought it up. People jumped on
Yeah,
it, right? And then
yeah,
it became a
and
thing. And I mean, heck, even Macklemore sang a song about 10,000 hours,
oh,
right? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
the
there's a song
10,000
called
hours,
10,000 Hours. Yeah, yeah,
the 10,000 steps. People
right.
have 10 fingers. They love thinking
Yeah,
in tens. Anything.
right. But the steps thing, you're right. But I was
Yeah,
thinking about the hours. But
like
you're right. These
no,
things come up arbitrarily to a degree. It's just a
yeah.
nice round number. Yeah,
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm happy you brought that up actually because they sound so similar. And SMART goals are very much the same, where they sound amazing. And SMART goals. This usually stands for specific, memorable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. Though everybody has different words for these things,
right.
but the research on them identifies the fact that there is even research waste around them because of how unhelpful they are and how not conducive they are to helping us achieve our goals. So, they say to set realistic goals, but actually more challenging goals lead us to accomplish more. And so they more motivate us more when they're not like when we actually having them be not only merely attainable but a challenge so that we motivate ourselves to into action. And there's redundancy in the criteria as well. So, aren't achievable goals also realistic, and aren't time bound goals specific? And goals actually don't need to be specific to be helpful. Especially so there's two stages of a goal, the learning phase and the performance phase of a
Yeah.
goal. When we're in that learning phase where we're just getting acquainted with, okay, what does it actually take to run a marathon? Having a specific goal can be counterproductive because it for lack of a better word, makes us hyper focus on something that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so,
You want scatter,
so,
you
but
want you want that wider lens, right? You
yeah,
almost want that at
yeah.
the beginning because you don't know enough.
Yeah, exactly, and so it and actually, more specific goals at the beginning, of a goal when we're learning about it can lead to more frustration. It can lead us to make us wanna give up when we feel like we're not living up to these expectations that we have, and that's another topic of the book where so often goals are really just predictions in disguise of where we believe our current and our future actions will take us, and those predictions become expectations, which lead us to disappointment. There's a whole psychology of goals in that regard too. But SMART goals, they are often counterproductive and they don't really work. What does work is considering all of the different layers of our life across which we need to become more deliberate, as well as how desire plays into the picture, how aversion and procrastination play into the picture, and how critically motivation plays into the picture with our values.
You know, you talked about sepia-tone goals too, which I love,
Yeah,
especially because you
yeah,
mentioned the night owl part, and that has been so. It's
yeah.
interesting because we've been told societally, get up early, get up early. You should get up early. You should get up early. You
Mhm.
should do this. You should. None of us are immune to this, by the way, because in the book you
Yeah.
talk about like, hey, maybe I should do this. I mean, after all, and again, you are somebody who is curious and will experiment
Mhm.
on this kind of thing. But I love the fact that you kind of, again, can you share a little bit about the thought around that, like the idea of like I'm a night
Yeah.
owl, let's make these, and then where that term sepia toned goals kind of came
Yeah.
from?
Oh, 100%. So, yeah, I'm a night owl as well. I do my best work at night. I love the night. And I struggle to get out of bed, very early in the morning. But for whatever reason, I think because of the, you know, the culture that surrounds us, I
The
have
urge.
these.
You brought up the urge, which is very early on. Like you almost said urge. Like there's this urge
Yeah.
to because it pulls. But anyway, sorry, keep
Yeah,
going.
there's an that urge to conform to expectations that are expected. Conformity being one of the 12 values as well. So yeah, but even knowing all that on some level, I have this sepia tone fantasy. This idea of being that early riser, waking up at 5 or 5:30 to read the Globe and Mail and meditate and do a bit of journaling. And maybe meditate a little bit more, not maybe catch up on email and do all things that are holy with my hours, first thing in the morning. But then I realize every single time I implement this ritual into my life that I absolutely hate the ritual. I have to go to bed when friends want to hang out, when there's hockey games on, when, concerts are happening,
Yep.
or else my entire, next day is disrupted. And it just doesn't fit with the life I live or the biology I have. Because, of course, we're all wired differently. We all have different chronotypes. And that it maps on top of interesting research, I believe, from Till Ronenberg, who found that there is no difference in somebody's socioeconomic standing based on what time they wake up at. So people who wake up at like 8:30 are just as successful as people who wake up at 5:30. It's how deliberate we are with our hours after we wake up that make the biggest difference. But it highlights the fact that when it comes to our goals, there are so many traps that we fall into. And most of the traps involve not considering the full intention stack truly. Because a lot of goals, New Year's resolutions, 92% of people fail at the New Year's resolutions they make. And it's because it's so easy to daydream about that goal layer of the intention stack. But how does that filter down into plans? And below that, how does that filter down into what our day to day actually has to look like for us to attain the goal? And more broadly than that, how does this fit with our values? How does this fit with the kind of person we truly wish to become in our life that on a lot of levels we already are. And so the biggest trappings of goal setting happen to be not looking at all the different layers of intention in our life. Because when you look at the day to day of a goal like waking up at 5:30, you blast through that sepia tone filter and you realize that, wait a sec, it means going to bed at 9:30, and all this stuff is happening at 9:30. And so there's a great quote, and I forget who said it. I believe I mentioned this in the book. If not, it was in my head when I was writing this section, which is how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And
yeah, and
Mary
Dillard.
Oliver?
No, it was Annie,
Yeah,
Annie
Annie
Dillard. Yeah,
Dillard,
and you
yeah.
did mention, and it is
Yeah.
in the book.
Okay, good. That's good. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I put it in there because it is so relevant to goal setting because we can't just have an idea of a goal. We need to consider the execution of the goal and the meaning of a goal at the same time, or else there's no way we're going to achieve it.
Right. It's funny as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about the idea of, that Ted Lasso scene where he's playing darts. If you see, where all things aside, obviously, I mean, for spoiler alert, he's playing darts with the antagonist in the show, and the antagonist misjudges him, and he goes on this speech about be curious, not judgmental, etc. But I looked at something else. I don't know how to play darts. I don't at all. I always assumed that you go for the bullseye every single time, because that's where your attention goes, right? But there's that part that no one really talks about, unless especially if you're a person who plays darts, you just go right on by this, which goes back to your idea of you need to be broader with your view of things when you're looking at goals initially. And I think the barkeep says you need 2 20s and a bullseye. I'm like, why does he need 2 20s? I don't shouldn't it all just be bullseyes? And I think what that spoke to me on was this idea of we try to get too precise. Like we strive for precision, which is as opposed to looking at things like maybe from a wider lens of maybe tolerance. Like, hey, what, we hear about this all the time, minimum viable product, all that stuff. We've heard of we also heard of big, hairy, audacious goals and all that stuff, right? We get all this stuff around that. And SMART goals, again, specific, measure, all of that stuff to get so dialed in and precise that we might miss the mark, because that might not be the way to. So why I bring this up is, as the first thing is when I was going through the book, I was beaming ear to ear, because I remember having a confrontation with somebody once when I said every task is an intention. So if you call them intentions, then and they're like, no, intentions are bigger. I'm like, yes and no, because anything you intend to do, that's the root of the term intent. That is, if it's on your list and it's an intent, ergo task. So, and you talk about the difference between default, deliberate, all that stuff. How do you get somebody to view? Because I think that's one of the keys. If you and the book serves going through the book will help. But for somebody who gets locked in language, right? No, this is a big project, so it's not an intention, or intentions are very, very grand, as opposed to, how do you get someone to rethink that? Because I think that's part of the problem around it.
Oh man, so this is where I am so happy to be with my fellow productivity nerds in chatting with you, because you mentioned the difference between default and deliberate intentions. So, all right. And this is the interesting thing talking about this book, is I'm just, coming out of the cave to talk about this book in various places. So I need to really read the room, who I go into the weeds with, but I'm going to go into the weeds here.
You and I both know you're going to get a lot of, so why'd you write the book? And you're going to get the placeholder boilerplate stuff, but with obviously, like you said, you're swimming. We're swimming in the same pool here. Let's go into the deep end. An intention. It was difficult to arrive at a definition of it, because you're right. Everybody does have these preconceived notions about what does it mean to be intentional. But the ultimate definition, I think, is the simplest one, which is an intention is just a plan that will do something. And we set these plans that will do things both deliberately and habitually, which might sound weird on the surface, right? How can an intention, which we think of as strategic, thoughtful, deliberated, how can it be habitual? But any habit that we have is really just our mind setting an intention for us in response to certain cues, a certain
time of day happens, or we encounter certain people, or we feel a certain way, or we just did something else and that's associated with this thing, something happened, and so that triggers a mental process for us to set a plan to do something that we then usually follow through with. The fact that something is a habit makes us more likely to follow through with whatever it is that we're intending to do. But the interesting thing, and this was a lesson that I learned from the monks, that then I connected with the research. Some things, you start with the science and then you see the mental processes from chatting with monks. And this was a case of seeing mental processes and then going to the science. Not so there are two types of intentions in our life, which is very, very interesting to me because I always thought about intention as something that was very deliberated. But there's the default intentions that we set automatically. These are any habit that you have. They're any way of speaking and acting, everything for just your default way of being. And then we have the deliberate intentions that we have that we layer on top of the default intentions in our life. And so in the example I give in the book I give the example of like some like movie protagonist where they're going through the same dull humdrum motions of their life, essentially on autopilot mode, just living on default, pure habit energy in everything they do. Right? They wake up, they go to the same dead end job. They do this, they sit down at the computer, they go home, they make the same, but then something happens and it's like boom, they snap out of the defaults and then they decide what they really want to do. They want to like become a boxer or
You're
something, or
you're
they want to,
describing you're describing the film Nobody by Bob Odenkirk with Bob Odenkirk,
yeah,
right? Where
yeah.
he's the
There's a
accountant.
lot of movies
There's
like this.
yes, but you're right.
Yeah, yeah. But we all have moments of awakening like this. Like if you were to wake up and the whole family was gone and it was the weekend and maybe you're just in bed, maybe you'd live on default mode for a little while. Maybe you just kind of go on habit energy and go on your phone for a while. But then that moment will come and you'll want to snap back to reality. Oh,
Oh,
you'll feel gravity
there goes
setting in.
gravity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I made a few jokes with that line in the book, but my editors took them all out.
Well, you don't
Um,
because you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. That's
yeah, you really find yourself through intention. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what they were saying. No, they weren't. But you eventually snap back into it and you think, "Okay, what do I really wanna do here? What do I really wanna get out of this day?" And that is when you set a deliberate intention for what to do differently. And so if you look at where intention comes from, it's fascinating. Some intentions come from those default sources, right? We're on a road trip, we gotta go to the bathroom, so we set an intention without even thinking to make a pit stop at the next, gas station. Or we have these impulses to avoid pain and experience more pleasure in our life. And so that leads us to talk to strangers or meet people or download a dating app or whatever it might be, setting intentions for those. But then we have the ones that are on the more deliberate side of the spectrum. It almost is a spectrum where we learn something. So a big source of intention is the lessons we have learned in the past. So you listen to a podcast like yours and you think, okay, next time I'm going to do that differently. And then when the next time rolls around, you remember that information you've internalized, which leads you to set an intention differently. You create a different intention. And then the ultimate source of deliberate intentionality is what is called our self reflective capacity, which is our ability to look within ourselves to ask questions of our inner world and really determine where we wish to go. And so there's all these sources of intentionality. Some are deliberate, some we have by default, which we call habits. And the time we spend across both in our life are about 50-50. And it's absolutely fascinating the lay of the land, what leads us to make plans to do things, where intention comes from. And so by shaping those sources, we can shape the intentions we set and ultimately the life that we live. It's the research is really quite remarkable.
As you were talking about the idea of, snapping out of it, I wonder if,
Mhm.
and you could, I mean, this is going back to the night owl part in your book, and we'll get into reflective practice before we wrap up here. But
Yeah.
the sepia color goal that you were
Mhm.
talking about, so becoming an early riser,
Mhm.
I can tell you that I mean, I'm sure you have the same experience where if you're up too early, you're on default. Like if you're not
Oh,
listening to your
yeah.
body clock,
Yeah.
you're not wired for that. And so the
Mhm.
snapping out of it, I've noticed when I was getting up earlier that I'm like, why I was asking questions, right? Like, why is it taking me so long to get going? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I had to
Yeah.
go, you almost have to go back to I was going back to the studs a little bit, like, okay, let's pull this down and take a look. I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
because I'm trying to do back to values, back to priorities, the things above it. I'm doing things
Mhm.
that are counter to what the way I am capable of doing my best work. So
Yeah.
I'm going to reorient, re-engineer, build a new, I have this intention, this plan to do
Mm.
this thing. So, and
Yeah.
letting go of that goal or that idea. In fact, I went a step further and I'm like, I'm going to lean in the complete opposite direction and be the night owl. Like, say, look, like I'm going
Mhm.
to champion it. And
Yeah.
I wonder, did that, like, when you were going through that experience of I'm going to be an early riser, was it that
Mm.
reflective practice and realizing maybe, hey, it's taking me longer to snap out of things.
Mhm.
I'm disinterested for too much of my day. What's going on
Yeah.
here? That sort of thing.
Yeah. There without self-direction or without self-reflection, it's nearly impossible to become more productive
You stay on default, right?
because
You just stay on
yeah,
default.
you do what's latest and loudest when you're at work. You just do what's in front of you, whatever's urgent, whatever fire needs to be put out. And it's not a great way to be. I think most people find it in that mode when they enter into it. You just kind of stay where you are. You don't really find much more meaning. You don't find much more accomplishment. You don't become more like you end up being fine because you respond to the incentives that happen to be around you. You perform well, and things are just fine,
Right.
right? But where there's a genuine opportunity to become better is when we tap into that self-reflective capacity. When we have some self-reflective loop around the changes that we're trying to integrate into our life. And so one thing that I'm a huge advocate for in the book is just a weekly goal review. And so just in case people don't buy the book, I need to share this tact. Like, make a
Hmm.
list of all the goals that you have and review them every week, but don't just see them as static, these sepia toned ideas. Edit them as you go. Every week, do a little reflection and ask, okay, how much progress what's my rate of progress with these goals? Am I satisfied with that? Or am I frustrated by that? And if I'm frustrated, why is it more of a challenge than I thought it would be? Is it because what I'm doing, so not just the outcome, the process goal that you have around something, which that's another little thing, but
Yeah, you got
essentially just what you're
process
doing to make
progress.
the
There's lots of stuff in here that can
yeah,
help you with that for sure. For sure.
yeah, there's a lot of tools in there for it. But is the process you're using to invest in the goal, is it effective enough? Is it motivating enough? Is the outcome that you're after aligned with what you value? So, for example, one of the values is face. One of the 12 values is face, which is how we come across to other people,
Hmm.
and avoiding humiliation. But then we have the other ones that we've chatted about, like self direction, which is going our own way, pleasure, which is just sense pleasure. Like, some of your goals might be built around things that you don't value. So, 40% of the globe right now is trying to lose weight. That stat has been pretty steady for a while.
Mhm.
And so maybe you have a goal to like lose 10 pounds to look amazing by beach season or something. That's a goal built around face because it's looking good, which is how you come across to other people. But maybe face isn't a big value of yours. Maybe self-direction and pleasure are. And so a better goal might be, okay, experiment with 3 different ways of eating to find the one that is most pleasurable and
Yeah.
sustainable. So you're building it around self-direction and pleasure. And you won't get your goals right at first, right? It takes a lot of these incremental improvements because remember, a goal is really just a prediction in disguise. It's a guess at where we believe our current and our future actions will take us. And I don't know if you've ever tried predicting stuff, but it's hard. It's hard to predict the future. We're not even futurists, nobody ever checks their predictions. They're usually wrong. And so we try to do this, but we're bad at it. And so we need to revise the goals that we have, edit them so they're more in line with these 12 values that we all share in different amounts, and drop the ones that aren't serving us that we find to be just not connected to the kind of person that we want to become. Because ultimately, if you continue to edit the process that you're taking to achieve a goal, which is the bottom of the intention stack, the plans, the daily, the shorter term intentions, and you edit your outcome goals, which are revolve around your values, which are really what you care about, and you can't find a way to align them, you're after something that is not for you. And so by pursuing that thing, you're pursuing it as at the expense of every other thing that could be more meaningful and actually add to your life far more. So there's that opportunity cost to goals too. Every one goal we pursue, we decide not to pursue a million more.
Yeah.
And so it's being strategic, not just about the individual goals that we have, but also about the change that we're making in our life in general. So, not getting pigeonholed by what we think we want, but looking at the values and connecting with what we really want.
Well, we got a couple things here before we
Mm.
wrap up. First, Jackie brings up a really good point. Saying things are fine is damning with faint praise. I'm like, that's a really actually. I kind of like, because as soon as I hear the word fine, it reminds me of that that cartoon
This
where
is
the
fun.
dog, yeah, the
Yeah.
dog that's sitting amongst the flames, going, "This is fine," right? As if
Mhm.
that's the default, right?
Yeah.
And of course, she also follows up with, "Can't wait to read this." Well, you can pre-order it
Oh.
right now, so
Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
yeah.
go.
Pre-orders are open. Yeah.
And Tim has also pointed out the book sounds really interesting. Seems to present a fresh stance on why we do and don't do things. Definitely one to order.
Mm.
Where can
Yeah.
people pick up the and
Oh,
pre-order the book, Chris? I want to be respectful
yes.
of time, and
Oh,
this is great.
yes.
By the way, to tip for anyone who picks it up. Well, you
Mhm.
could see there's like dog-eared, like I've dog-eared it like crazy. It's not
Yeah.
and this is indicative of your work in general. It's not I'm going to blaze through this thing, and like you can't, especially when you get to the values piece. I would
Mm.
really spend some time
Yeah.
reading and thinking and
Yeah.
again, the capacity for self-reflection I think is really important in that section. You
Mhm.
can actually enact that, and that
Yeah.
was one of the things where I'm like, okay, this is not going to be a book. I mean, I knew this going in based on your writing, but I'm like, this is not one that you can go, all right, let's pour over this in a day or two. It definitely needs some time. And
Yeah.
for those that are members of Time Crafting Trust Premium, Sarah, who is our operations person, says Intentional already has had one suggestion for the book club, and it's not even out yet.
Hey.
It's not even out yet.
Nice.
So there you go. So Chris, where can
Okay.
people pre-order the
Yes.
book, pick it up, and where can they keep up with what you've got going on?
Yes. I'll share something candidly. This is the first book that I feel proud of creating.
Wow.
And to some people that they find it surprising, to other people it makes sense. I feel like I've been doing this productivity thing for 10 years and that I finally created something that I'm proud to hold this in my hand. And I should be prouder of my other books
You
that
know
I
what
feel,
though?
but just relative.
I will say that of all the books I've read that you've written, this one it feels like I'm talking to you. This one
Oh,
feels
good.
more conversational, I think, other than your initial book when you were quote,
Mm,
learning to write a book, right? Really,
yeah.
because like the
Yeah.
blogging and all that stuff, where it was
Mhm.
definitely about you. And I think that's the
Yeah.
distinction. That was about what you were finding and you. and that's fine because that's all you can speak from is your experience. But
Yeah.
over the past 15 years, easily from when
Yeah.
you've started this
Or
journey,
10, yeah.
10
Yeah.
or it's this one feels like it's got the combination of those things, like what your research and such. It's like you're mixing, the conversational tone with the research, and it's to that end. I think that's where I noticed. That's the thing I noticed.
Oh. Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, it feels this one feels special for whatever reason. So you can I do need to okay, I'll do this in 30 seconds.
Yep.
Because I wanna mention the 12 values in case nobody like, somebody doesn't buy the book. Um, think about these. I'll mention them quick. So
Sure.
self-direction, stimulation, so seeking novelty, pleasure, so sense pleasure, achievement, power is another. Actually, the least common value overall. Face, which we talked about, how we come across to other people. Security, which includes personal and societal security, value that's been going up recently, curiously, not surprisingly. Tradition, conformity, humility, universalism, which is protecting and preserving the welfare of people and of nature, and benevolence, so kindness and serving others. We're all the sum of our values. So the ones that stand out to you, that's who you are. So the book is called Intentional: How to Finish What You Start. I think it's the best thing I've ever made. Maybe it'll be the best thing I ever make. Maybe I could stop here. Maybe I've peaked. But yeah, you can pre-order it if you're watching this early. It comes out January 6th in US and Canada, January 1st in the UK and Commonwealth countries. And yeah, I think it'll really help you out. Thank you for having me on.